Hi, I'm about to show you something in the video game The Last of Us that I am 100% certain you have never noticed before. So here we are in one of the missions towards the start of the game, walking through an industrial port area. This is the original 2013 release of The Last of Us, by the way, not the 2022 remake. That'll be important in a minute. Towards the end of this section, there's this brick building here, and I want to take a second to look up at the windows on it. There's a set of 5 windows along the second floor in a 2-1-2 configuration, and the pairs on the sides are super close together. It's maybe like 18 inches apart. The overall shape of each window is roughly a square, and each one is made up of 16 individual glass panes. You got all that? Okay, keep it in mind. Now we're going to head inside and go up to the second floor of the same building, and we're going to look at those same windows from the inside. Okay, ready? Here they are. That's not right at all. The inside of this building is completely different from the reality of the outside of this building. Now, personally, I think things like this are great. It's part of what gives video games their kind of slightly uncanny and memorable atmospheres, but here's the thing. They remade The Last of Us in 2022. It was called The Last of Us Part 1. And when they did, this random little window mismatch was fixed, which feels crazy to me. But when I looked around this random bakery kitchen that we're standing in, I realized that they basically updated everything in here as well. More realistic baking equipment, there's a more realistic number of ovens for the size of the bakery. They even added smoke detectors and fixed the exit signs so that everything in this room is up to code. The level of detail they went to with the remake seems legitimately insane, which got me thinking, is it legitimately insane? You know, how many random, inconsequential details did they take the time to go through and fix in the remake of The Last of Us? So I played through the entire original release of the game and made note of 7 hyper-specific details across the game's most iconic locations, and we're going to go through each of them one by one to see which things they fixed and which things they didn't. Now, the very first thing I want to look at is from more or less the start of the game. At the start of The Last of Us, you wake up as Joel Miller, a justifiably grumpy middle-aged man in the post-apocalypse, and you step outside your apartment inside a military quarantine zone to go run some errands. But before you can run those errands, if you look to the side, you'll see something. A weirdly large number of sports balls scattered around Joel's alleyway. I don't know what exactly caught my eye with these balls right at the start of the game, and after I saw this, I half expected to see balls like this just all over the place. Like maybe these balls are just a default garbage object that Naughty Dog put all over the game, but there aren't any. I couldn't find any other instance in the entire first chapter of the game where they had these balls, which means that, as far as we can tell, someone is hoarding them all inside this little alleyway outside of Joel's apartment. So, what did they do with the sports balls in the remake? Did they get rid of them? Let's find out. So I came out of Joel's apartment at the start of the mission, and I immediately turned left to look on the couch, and you're not going to believe this. They took them out. They took out all of the sports balls. This is so funny to me because it means that some developer at Naughty Dog had the same reaction I did, which is they played through the game, you know, because they're working on remaking it, and they saw all the balls, and they said, why the hell are there so many balls in this alleyway? And then they decided to remove them because it didn't make sense, even though it was just like some random, unremarkable background detail. But maybe even funnier is that they did actually leave one. There is a single soccer football in the corner here, so they technically kept the spirit of the original location intact, but they changed it from this strange little subconscious footnote into something that fits the environment well enough that your brain probably wouldn't even register that it was happening. Absolutely incredible. This makes me really excited for everything else we're going to look at. So Naughty Dog clearly took a lot of time and care with what they changed in the remake, but we are just getting started. There's some pretty insane things we're going to be checking later on. The next place I want to look in the game is in the 3rd chapter called The Outskirts, where Joel and Ellie and Tess are traveling through downtown Boston to try and reach the Fireflies when they stumble across this building. This building is a real building in Boston called the Old State House, and it's a really, really old building that has a museum inside of it. You actually get to go inside of that museum later on in the game, which is super cool, and no, none of the exhibits or paintings in that museum are real-life objects. I checked. But what we're concerned about is the outside, because there's something wrong here. Here is what the Boston State House looks looks like in the original version of The Last of Us, and here is what it looks like in real life. No offense, but it ain't even close. They got the tower thing on top right, but the little round windows aren't there. The ornamentation around the clock is totally wrong. The balcony thing is the wrong material, and it is way too wide. At first, I thought that it could be because the architecture of the building might be copyrighted, so they couldn't just put it in the game without paying some kind of licensing fee, which is why a lot of buildings in Grand Theft Auto are sort of close to their real-life counterparts, but not quite right. Yes, it turns out that architecture can be copyrighted, which makes sense, but it is interesting. But this building in real life is from like 1711 or something, or 1710, and I'm pretty sure that buildings that old don't have copyright protection, which means that the mistakes they made in-game were either artistic license or mistakes. So obviously what I want to know is, did they fix this in the remake? Did they make it look like its real-life counterpart? Let's find out. Okay, wait, this is interesting. It's definitely still wrong. It's still way too wide. But look, they added little round windows, they fixed the ornamentation around the clock, and they made the balcony white like it's supposed to be. So they definitely knew it wasn't right in the original, and they made an effort to fix it, but they still kept it way too wide, which forced them to add extra windows and some other stuff. So why is that? You know, why go through all the trouble of getting it closer but not actually fixing it? Well, I actually think it's kind of obvious if you think about it. In about 5 minutes, Joel and Ellie and Tess are going to go inside of the museum and fight a bunch of zombies. So the inside of this building has to be big enough for all of that to take place. You know, we need space to be gamers. Which means that when they remade The Last of Us, they knew that they wanted to fix this, you know, to make it look more like the real old state house. But they were constrained by the actual design of the game, which needed it to be wide enough to have that sequence happen later on. But did they just, you know, give up and stick to the old version? No. They still put in effort to redesign the outside of the building and get as close as they possibly could without ruining the game part of the game. I think that's kind of incredible. I came into this thinking that The Last of Us Part 1, the remake, was just kind of like a reskin of the original game, but it really is starting to feel like they remade the entire game from the ground up, like thoughtfully, which they did literally say is what they did in the marketing of the game, but I didn't believe them. Anyway, so the old state house is another win for Naughty Dog. We're gonna have to start making these harder, and I'm happy to say we will. I'm also happy to say that after more than 6 months apart, this channel is finally being sponsored by Factor Meal Delivery Service again. Welcome to the sponsorship. Thank God. I don't know how I survived the last 6 months without Factor. I mean that half ironically, a little bit seriously. Ask anybody that knows me and they'll tell you that I am not a fan of having to take a bunch of time out of my day to cook and eat. I love and respect cooking. I enjoy cooked food, but most of the time I would rather be making YouTube videos or doing something else than cooking. Factor is a really good solution to that problem. It's as easy as drinking a meal supplement smoothie, except it's actual food that you can cook and eat in as little as 2 minutes. So you don't have to do any of the work, and you don't even have to do the work of coming up with ideas of meals to eat, because they have a whole bunch that you can pick from every single week. And you don't even have to do that if you don't want to. That you can just set your dietary preferences and Factor will pick them out for you. So you can be super lazy. So if you're someone like me who struggles with getting real solid food in your body, if you tend to just grab the easiest thing from the cupboard, like a bowl of cereal or a frozen pizza, which are both great, Factor is a great way to work around your lifestyle while significantly improving the quality of the food that you're eating. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use promo code AnyAustinFB50 to get 50% off your first Factor box plus free breakfast for 1 year. That is AnyAustinFB50 at factor75.com. This offer is only good for new subscribers, so if you've gotten Factor because of me before, too bad. You guys don't get anything. I'm not going to say that. Anyway, the next place we're going to go is in the 4th chapter of the game, the one where you're hanging out with that guy Bill trying to get a car to take Ellie across the country, and it's a little place called Jane's Cupcake Shop. I'm always curious with food service establishments in video games whether or not they actually contain the correct equipment for making the food that they claim to be selling. What a sentence that was. Holy cow. This is my job, by the way. Inside Jane's Cupcake Shop, you do find some cupcake-related equipment like speed racks, ovens, and display trays, but you also find 2 small details here that don't fit at all. Firstly, there is ketchup and hot sauce available as condiments, which is disgusting in a cupcake shop. That shouldn't be there. But secondly, the menu board on the wall says that they don't just sell baked goods like cupcakes. They sell ice cream. But here's the thing. As far as I can tell, there is nothing in this building that could support the making or selling of ice cream. No ice cream machines, no refrigerated display cases for ice cream. There aren't even any refrigerators in this cupcake cupcake shop at all, which is kind of a bigger problem, frankly. If Naughty Dog is going to take the time to redo that whole bakery that we went through at the beginning of the video, surely they fixed this one up too, right? Let's find out. Starting in the back room here, the very first thing that caught my eye was this here in the corner. This is a refrigerator. They did it. They actually added a refrigerator, which you could put ice cream in. And on top of that, they even added a walk-in cooler, which is even more appropriate for a place that makes and sells ice cream. Now, there isn't actually an ice cream machine that I can see, but that's not strictly necessary for a place to sell ice cream. There are a lot of places you'll go that will sell ice cream, but they just buy it from elsewhere and then ship it in and hold it and sell it. So in the remake, this cupcake shop is perfectly set up to sell ice cream. But the irony here is that in the remake, this place no longer makes and sells ice cream. If we walk into the front room, you'll see that the menu board has been moved from this wall on the far wall to the wall behind the cash register, which does make sense because then people can look at it when they're ordering. But on closer inspection, all of the stuff that they had listed for sale in the original game has been reduced to just cupcake flavors. That's the only thing they have written up there. That doesn't mean that they don't need refrigerators, obviously. I think that every single food service establishment probably has both a walk-in cooler and individual fridges, even if they don't make ice cream. But it's ironic that the thing we came here to check didn't end up surviving at all. They didn't fix the ice cream problem. They just made the ice cream stop existing, which is technically a solution and honestly kind of the funniest possible outcome. Oh, and thankfully they did remove, God bless, they did remove the ketchup and mustard. Instead, they now have coffee AirPods here for people to get their own coffee. Just like everywhere in this remake, they added tons of other details, including changing the sign out front. And I just want to throw out there that as someone who lived a few years working at a bakery in real life, shout out La Boulangerie in New Orleans, a lot of the stuff that they put in The Last of Us remake really brings back some weird and highly specific memories. They did a really good job with this. So in my opinion, that is another successful update from Naughty Dog. We still haven't defeated them, but we will, I think. We'll get them on at least one of these for sure. Probably the very last one. The fifth detail that we're going to look at is in one of my favorite types of details in video games, and it's something that a lot of games end up doing on accident that I think really contribute to why video game atmospheres are so great, and it is in a hotel in Pittsburgh. The hotel in Pittsburgh is one of the game's most memorable locations, I think, and it has a lot to do with just how detailed and gorgeous it is, even 13 years after it first came out. But even here, if we look close enough, we can find some very subtle and funny places where things don't make sense in a way that only a video game could get away with. The specific example I want to look at is back here. There's a hotel room here that you have to hop in from the outside, and if you look around in that hotel room, there are some oddities, to say the least. For some reason, this hotel room ended up with like 5 mattresses in here that they're using to barricade the door, which is just weird. But maybe even weirder is just how huge the layout of this room is. If we take it at face value and assume that the extra mattresses don't actually belong here, the layout would be something like this, with the bed and the side tables here, the dressers here, and then the TV all the way on the other side of the room, like 20 feet away from the bed. We talked about this a bit in that Call of Duty video that we did a couple of years ago, where there was that weird gigantic bathroom with almost nothing in it, because characters in games sometimes need a lot more space to maneuver around than you think, especially dumb kids who follow you around, am I right? Just kidding, Ellie, I'm sorry. So you end up with doorways that are really, really large, or rooms that are laid out in ways that are sort of insane if you think about it. Okay, fine, no big deal. But then you climb on top of this pile of trash and you get up onto the next floor and into another hotel room. And if you look closely at this one, you'll notice that there just isn't a door. There is no way for a normal person to get in here. And don't say that it's behind that armoire or through the other door. It's not. The other doorway here just leads into the bathroom, and the only other way out of this bathroom is through another hole in the wall that connects to somebody else's bathroom. So that's it. The only way in and out of this is through a hole in the floor that we assume wasn't there when the hotel was operating. Seems like a nice place. So all they would need to do in the remake is to add a door to the wall, and this will be fixed. But did they do it? Let's find out. In the bottom room, everything stayed more or less the same. It's still weirdly oversized, still barricaded with an unreasonable amount of mattresses, no changes there. But on the second floor with the missing door, which is really what we're curious about, guess what? There is no change. It is all exactly the same. All they had to do was add a door, and they didn't do it. This is really cool to me because it kind of shows just how little actual realism matters to making a space feel realistic, which The Last of Us Part 1 undoubtedly does. The goal here was just to make you feel like you were weaving through a decaying hotel, and as my high school economics teacher used to say, there are many ways to skin a cat, and none of them involve perfectly realistic hotel rooms. Either way, the effect is the same, and it works. But they still didn't fix it, so for the purposes of our dumb YouTube video, Naughty Dog finally gets caught with a mistake. Nice. It's 3 points to 1, but that's all right. The next thing I want to look at is going to be in a chapter called The Suburbs, which is one of my favorite sections because it lets you walk through a variety of really normal houses. Not unlike that one mission in Modern Warfare 2 where you fight a war inside of a McDonald's, being able to go through a regular old suburban neighborhood in the post-apocalypse is a good shortcut for helping the player really picture what it might have been like if this actually happened. You know, maybe regular old isn't the right adjective because this is actually like a super nice neighborhood, but whatever. Now, the thing that caught my eye in this area is something that's painted on the front of most of the houses here, which is this mysterious X symbol. These symbols are officially called urban search and rescue markings, but you might have heard them called X codes or Katrina crosses after their prevalence in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina in 2005, and they are used by disaster relief agencies to communicate information about what's inside of a particular building in the aftermath of a disaster. Let's take this one from the original Last of Us as an example. The top section here tells you when the house was searched, so in this case it was 11:01 or November 1st. The left section tells you who searched the house, which in this case is NG or National Guard. The bottom is how many living or dead bodies they found in the house, which in this case is 1 living and 2 dead. Kind of sad. And then the right section is additional information about hazards that might be inside, in this case rats. Now, in the original game there aren't really any firm connections between what's written in these X codes and what's actually inside the houses. The best example of this is how the ones that say rats don't actually have any dead rats or other rat-related evidence inside of them. It's just a regular post-apocalyptic video game house with supplies and open cupboards and whatever. So as far as the remake is concerned, that's kind of what I want to see. Did they add anything in these houses to further deepen the environmental storytelling of the X codes? Let's find out. The first thing that seemed clear was that the codes themselves didn't change from the original game to the remake, which means the question becomes whether the interiors of the houses have changed at all. The first house I searched was one that listed 4 dead bodies and something called 01 in the hazards area. I couldn't find anything online about what 01 meant, so I just headed inside to see if there was anything that stood out to me, and there definitely was. The house got some pretty awesome upgrades in the small details, including fixing weird little layout mistakes that makes the space feel a lot more grounded. And there's one detail in particular in this house that kind of blew my mind, all the way down in the basement. This ping pong table. Seeing this here in the basement was like getting shot in the back of the head for me. And it might just be me, but I don't think it is, and I'm going to try to explain it to you. Every white person, and probably plenty of other people who grew up in early 2000s America, but you know, I can only speak for my guys, all of us had a friend with a ping pong table that was set up just like this in their slightly creepy unfinished basement. It was almost always situated right next to a pillar of some kind, just like it is here. It was on a concrete floor 3 feet from the washer and dryer. I have been in this basement. It is uncanny how good this basement is and how much of an upgrade it is from the first game. I mean, look at this comparison between the basement in the original and the basement in the remake. What an insane glow up to this basement with the placement of the water heater and the ping pong table and the lighting. But none of this has anything to do with those X codes that we pointed out at the start. You know, there is no evidence of rats here, for example, or evidence of whatever 01 means in this house, unless it means that there are 01 ping pong tables in the basement, maybe. And as I look through the rest of the houses in this neighborhood, unfortunately, there was nothing in any of those either that was related to their X codes. Lots of small little changes, but no additional environmental storytelling. So as much as I want to give them a point for the ping pong table in the basement, I'm not gonna, which means bam, we got him again. On to the next one. Our second to last stop on this journey is a personal favorite because it has to do with a gigantic piece of electrical infrastructure called Tommy's Hydroelectric Dam. For the most part, this place in the original game is a really fun, albeit not perfect, representation of a relatively low-power hydroelectric dam along a river in Wyoming. You've got the dam itself here that you can see from down below towards the start of the mission. There are intake chutes that you can see from the top, which bring water in to spin the turbines. There's some kind of internal pump or exciter motor here in this side room. Just lots of individual parts that you would expect to see at a hydroelectric dam. Do I know what any of these things do? No, I do not, but they're cool.
Look, I know what it is. I don't know how it does it.
But there is one specific detail that does seem odd to me. At some point in the mission, Tommy and his friends get the turbine here spinning again, and you can see it spinning. It's super cool. It's a fun moment. But my understanding is that turbines like this in real life are kind of broken into 3 sections, which you can see here on this picture of a turbine I found in Germany that's kind of similar to the one in game. On the right, this is the thing that's spinning and generating power, called the alternator. In the middle is this smaller wheel that's called a flywheel, which connects both of the sides together. And then on the left is a casing that actually has the water from the dam flowing through it at incredibly high speeds, which is what causes the whole thing to spin. So typically we're looking for a piece of equipment that has all three of these parts, but when we actually look at the one in game, it only has two. It has the alternator, which makes the electricity, and it has the flywheel. It's missing the actual turbine that's spun by the water. It's obviously an important piece of it. So as you can imagine, what I want to know is, did Naughty Dog upgrade these to make them into fully believable operational pieces of hydroelectric infrastructure? Good luck. One of the first things I noticed when I walked through this area in the remake actually gave me a lot of hope, because take a look at this. They actually updated the water intake blades on top to not only be much more detailed, but they also added a specific piece of signage stating clearly that this is a water intake system, which clearly demonstrates some level of knowledge of how this dam is meant to function, which makes me optimistic. But let's actually get into the turbine room. At first glance, the whole thing looks almost exactly the same, albeit the color balance is a lot nicer and it's easier to parse, and the room itself has a way more believable old building feel. But if we come around to the backside, where we might expect to see that additional axle spinning, that additional piece of equipment, there isn't anything. This is more or less the same half-finished turbine as in the original game, which means that unless I'm totally misunderstanding how a turbine like this functions, unfortunately, they were not updated to become insanely accurate representations of a hyper-specific piece of electrical infrastructure that nobody would notice except for us. Oh well, that's a third strike. Okay, it all comes down to this. I didn't plan this, by the way. That I didn't plan for it to be tied, okay? But this last place is the tiebreaker. So it all comes down to this very final one that I want to look at. And unfortunately for Naughty Dog, it is probably the most obscure and complicated one. Sorry, guys. In the final real mission of the game, the one where you're fighting through the hallways of a hospital, there's a part towards the beginning of the mission where you can go outside. The mission is set at night, and I noticed that when I looked up at the sky, I wasn't actually able to recognize any of the familiar northern hemisphere constellations that I do in real life. I think you know where I'm going with this. Now, I'm not an astronomer, so I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just being dumb. And so I used the Last of Us wiki to figure out exactly when and where this mission takes place, which seems to be the night of April 28th, 2034 in Salt Lake City, Utah. And then I looked up what the sky is actually going to look like on that night in that place, which I have a picture of here from Stellarium. Now, in the game, you can see the mountains in the distance from the roof of the hospital, and those mountains are on the east or southeast side of Salt Lake City in real life, which means that we're looking at roughly the northeast to southeast quadrant of the sky. And as you can see, there really aren't any shared constellations or objects between the real sky in April 2034 and the sky in the game. Now, the only thing here is technically we don't know exactly what hour of the night the game takes place, but we're not done yet, because later on in the mission you can hop out onto another balcony and you can see the moon, which helps us in two ways. Number one, we can actually use the moon to adequately guess what time of night it is based on the moon's position. Since the mountains are over here, we can guess that the moon is roughly directly south of us, which means that using Stellarium, we can probably guess that it's about 11:33 p.m., which is actually kind of a neat thing to know. Just realizing that it was, I don't know, something about that's weird that it was 11:33 p.m. when Joel was shooting all those guys. Anyway, but number two, it actually gives us something new to nitpick, because in the game, the moon is full, but in real life, on that exact date, at that exact time, the moon is going to be a waxing gibbous. So what we want to know is, did they get the stars fixed in the remake, and did they update the moon phase to be the correct moon phase for the date of the events of the game? And frankly, I will give them the point if they did either of those things. So let's find out. The vibe of the hospital here in the remake has definitely gotten a marginal upgrade, with some really nice subtle background details being added, including, kind of like earlier, adding more fire alarms to ensure that it's up to code. Really funny to me that they did that in so many of these missions. But when I turned the corner to jump out onto the balcony, I immediately saw something that didn't make sense. It was raining. And when I got outside to look up at the sky and see what they had done with that beautiful, still, starry night skybox, they had massacred it. It has been completely replaced with with weirdly bright overcast skies, bringing with them moody rain to help match the emotional climax of the game. And if we go out onto the other balcony where we saw the moon, it's all the same. All we get is a weird bright patch of sky where we can assume that the moon is, but we aren't given a solid look at the moon itself. So the question is, why did they do this, right? Did they do it because they just wanted to avoid doing all the work of updating the sky to be scientifically accurate? Were they trying to avoid the terrifying scrutiny of Neil deGrasse Tyson? Or did they actually think that the rainy atmosphere fit the emotional tone that they were going for better than the clear night sky? I don't know. I would love to hear from someone at Naughty Dog on why this decision was made. You know, it's beautiful for a developer to be able to put the effort in to make the game more how they wanted it to be, but kind of like with the George Lucas Special Edition Star Wars thing, it's also dangerous because you can actually end up ruining a vibe that you accidentally got, like the clear nighttime skybox. You know, maybe that wasn't what they wanted, but it actually made this really unique atmosphere that they've now destroyed. It goes both ways, right? That's just how art is. But unfortunately, I can't count this as a win. It's too much of a cop-out for me. I wanted to see a biblically accurate night sky. Sorry, Naughty Dog. Which means I win, you lose. You know, was I in charge of making all the challenges? Yes. Were they completely arbitrary? Yes. But I still win. I'm Annie Austin. Thanks for watching.
I see your eyes, the rearview mirror, and all your junk sits to